Hey you guys, I noticed in the comments section of my last video that many of you are struggling to find loot. It's something that I completely skipped over in my tips since I honestly forgot about this aspect of the game. Looting in DayZ has become so second nature to me that I honestly do it without thinking. Within the first few seconds of spawning, I know exactly which towns I'm going to visit throughout my journey. But I had completely forgotten this wasn't always the case, and when I was new to DayZ, I spent most of my time wandering around completely lost. With how quickly you die of hunger and dehydration now, I can see how getting lost can be a very frustrating and discouraging element of the game, and this wasn't the case when I first started playing. Keep in mind that this game has been developed on PC with a very small dedicated player base, and when the loot and hydration systems were created for the 0.63 update, it was probably with these players in mind, who already know the map. So in this video, I'm going to go over a very crucial skill that all DayZ players need to master if they want to survive and gear up efficiently. This skill is what I call looting paths. Looting paths are exactly what you think they are. They're a set of roads, paths, forests, fields, buildings, towns, and military bases that you pass through to collect loot. Which loot path you choose is usually determined by where you spawn, but most looting paths follows a pretty similar formula. To make this easy, I'll break it down in a few different steps. Step 1. Get off the coast and follow a road inland while looting outlying buildings along your way. It's important to get away from the coast and coastal cities since there are many players competing for the same loot. Instead of looting these popular locations, look for buildings that are somewhat out of the way since most players won't bother looting them. Step 2. Head to small, less traveled towns. Running up the main road and sprinting to a military base is an easy way to die of dehydration. Instead, you should find small towns that other players rarely visit to get a melee weapon, backpack, and small stock of food and water. These towns are usually pretty low risk with an abundance of basic loot. Step 3. Head to a town with a police station or stop at a military checkpoint to get basic guns and ammo. You're going to want something to defend yourself with before heading to a military base. You can find a police station in many of the larger towns and cities and look around for crashed police cars. Military checkpoints are small military bases with a few green tents that can be found along some roads and in some towns. Generally, you need to loot a few of these locations before you'll actually have a weapon with a mag and ammo. Step 4. Head to a small, less popular military base. I would say there are about 4 of these bases on the map: Pavlovo Military Base, Mishkino Tents, South Fiber Military Base, also known as VMC, and Kamensk Military Base. These locations are still extremely dangerous, but a bit less dangerous than places like Northwest Airfield and Tizzy Military Base since they have a smaller amount of loot. Still, it's not uncommon to get an assault rifle with a mag or 2 out of these locations, which will help you out when going to the bigger bases. Step 5. Head towards a large military base, stopping at small northern towns to restock on food and water along your way. Don't rush to a large base without gathering a proper stock of supplies. I would recommend having full hunger and thirst stats plus an additional 2 water bottles and full cans of food before heading to a large base. These bases can take a long time to fully loot, and you can easily find yourself pinned down in a building or being chased by a group of players. As for which base you want to go to, there are really 2 options to choose from: Northwest Airfield or Tizzy Military Base. I always go to Tizzy since I find it a lot safer. There are far less rooftops and windows to camp on, and the base is much farther out of the way, so players don't go here as often. However, if you're looking for PvP, I would recommend going to Northwest Airfield, as I would say it's still the PvP capital of Chernaris. At this point, you should be fairly set with a ton of gear, and you can choose whatever you want to do next. So now that you understand the looting path formula, I'm going to give you an in-depth example with one of my favorite paths. I call this the Solnichny route. It starts along the coast between Solnichny Town and Solnichny Factory near a gas station. From here I head up to a small group of buildings to gather some basic supplies. These buildings are rarely looted since Solnichny Town and Factory are so close by, and these locations attract more players. From here I head up to the tree line until I'm parallel to the factory silos, then I cut through the forest. Most players travel along roads since they're easier to follow and will always lead to a town at some point. However, by cutting through this forest, you'll end up in a small town called Orlovets. I absolutely love this little town, and it's one of my favorite locations to loot. There are very few roads that lead here, so players rarely pass through it. In all my time playing DayZ, I have never encountered another player here. For a small town, Orlovets has quite a few buildings to loot. The biggest drawback of this location, however, is that it doesn't have a well, which means that if you get really unlucky and don't find any water bottles or sodas, dehydration can be an issue. Luckily, there are quite a few apple trees in this town that can keep you alive in a pinch. On this run, when I entered Orlovets, I was dying of dehydration, but when I left I had 2 water bottles, 2 sodas, 2 cans of food, a backpack, a crowbar, and 2 pistol magazines. From here I head down the road towards a construction site which the game calls a factory for some reason. If you guys watch Frankie on PC's DayZ series, you may recognize this as a location where he built a base. This factory doesn't really have the best loot, but if you don't already have a backpack or decent melee weapon, you can usually find one here. After looting the factory complex, I came out of it with some 380 auto rounds, a splitting axe, a weapon cleaning kit, and a pair of shades for style. From here I head along the road to the town of Polana, not to be confused with Chernaya Polana, which is a completely different town entirely. This is a pretty great town with a ton of buildings to loot and a well to refill your water bottles. The risk of running into other players is a bit higher here, but it's still unlikely. I never loot the entire town since I'll find way more gear than I can actually carry, but Polana is a great town for getting a rifle or pistol. Be careful as you run into a lot of infected out here, so move carefully and don't forget to drink from the well before leaving. After looting about 30% of Polana, I had a pistol with 2 mags and plenty of ammo, a Mosin, some 45 ACP rounds, full water bottles, and a cowboy hat. Take the northwest road out of the town and head towards Gorka. Now this is where I go a little bit off-road and head to the left tree line to loot a hunting stand. Gorka has a bunch of hunting stands around it, and these are great places for finding high-capacity camouflage clothing. Since Gorka is a fairly dangerous town, I headed across to the north tree line to loot some hunting stands and scan the town from the top of the hill. When I felt safe entering, I walked down into the town and headed into the police station. Be very cautious looting police stations, as players like to camp inside waiting for you to walk in. Make sure you check all your corners and be prepared for anything. You most likely won't run into anyone, but it's better to be safe than sorry. After looting the police station, I searched for a bit and found a crashed police car before heading up the road and refilling my water bottles. At this point I'm fairly set on basic supplies, so I didn't bother looting any of the other buildings in the town. I didn't get too much from Gorka, but I did find a second pistol and a camo boonie hat. From here I take the western road out of Gorka towards Novi Sabor. This is an extremely long road, so make sure you have a decent supply of food and water before leaving. After walking along this road for a little while, I finally arrived at Novi Sabor. Like Gorka, I don't need too much from this town. I'm mostly here to check the police station and restock on food and water. Be very careful in Novi Sabor. This town is the convergence points of many different roads. Semi-geared players heading up north and fully geared players heading down south both stop in Novi to get food and water. It isn't uncommon for players to be camping the police station or peeking out the windows in the 2-story houses. Don't outstay your welcome and move on quickly. After looting Novi, I come out with a pair of brown hunter pants, a mag for my second pistol, and a scorpion mag. From here I move on to Starry Sabor, however I usually take a different route than most players. I don't cut across the field or take the road, but rather I cut across a different field up to a pair of hunting stands. From here I can scan for heli crash sites, then head across another field to Starry. I do this for 2 reasons. One is that the hunting stands have a chance to spawn high capacity camo clothes that are good to have when looting Starry, and the second is that players don't expect anyone to come up this way. Starry Sabor is probably the most dangerous town in all of Chernarus, given its central location and small military base. After running across the field, I'll be set up on the hill overlooking the town, which is a great position to be in when scanning the area. Using this path, I've caught many base campers off guard and killed them for easy gear. After a short time scanning, I head down the hill into Starry's military checkpoint. Always be on guard here in case someone tries to sneak up on you. After looting the tents, I head down into the town to check for crashed police cars and refill my water bottles. Like Novi, you don't want to linger here for too long and you should move on fairly quickly unless you're looking for a fight. Upon leaving Starry, I had acquired a brown hunting jacket, an AKM mag, a USG mag, an ACOG scope, a can of tactical bacon, and full water bottles. From here I run across the field and loot a hunting stand, then cut through a small choppy forest until I see the South Vibor military base. This is easily my favorite military base to loot since it's relatively small, has a hill to overlook the area, and limits approach angles with its walls. It also has a small river next to it which can help preserve your water bottles and let you travel longer before restocking. Make sure to check all the buildings, towers, and shipping containers as they all spawn gear. After looting VMC, I found a pack of 7.62x39 rounds, another can of tactical bacon, a red dot sight, an assault vest, 2 M4 mags, an SVD mag, a PSO-1 scope, and a USG-45 with 3 full mags. From here I make the long trek all the way to Tizzy's military base. I won't go too in depth with this since this is fairly simple. I follow the river up to the road leading into Vibor, but I don't go into the town. Vibor can be a quite dangerous town, and there's nothing in it that I really want. I bypass Vibor and head to the northwest road, then follow it to the town of La Patino. I restock on food and fill my water bottles at the well, then continue heading northwest. I bypass the town of Vavilovo and head directly to Sinistok. This is the last town I'll visit before heading to the military base, so I refill my water once again and replace any food I might be missing. Then, towards the back end of the town, I head up to a small path that runs up the hill. When I reach the top, I continue heading northwest until I hit a road. I head left down that road until I come to a fork, and turn right. This road leads directly to Tizzy military base. The first thing you'll see is an old abandoned radar station which will have a little bit of loot in it, but not too much. After looting the radar station, I head further down the road until I come to the actual military base. There'll be a large group of various different buildings and barracks, all of which have military gear. To the north of this section of the base will be a large multi-story building and a curved tent barrack along with a firing range, and to the southeast there will be a large group of military tents and enough loot to kit up an entire squad. After I was done looting the base, I was fully kitted with an M4 with 3 full mags and an additional 60 rounds, 20 more rounds for my Mosin, a black M65 jacket, an assault backpack, a canteen, another can of beans, combat boots, and a suppressor. And that wraps it up for this loot run. I hope everyone who's been struggling to find loot found this video helpful. This is just one of many runs that I do, and while I won't go into the details, I'll use the DayZ map to quickly show you guys my other routes for the remainder of this video. I hope these routes help, and good luck with the looting.